Yeah, Brandon Aiyuk, I'm going to take the over on his receiving yards. Right now, it's available at 80.5. I think there's probably a spot where you want to wait to place that prop because maybe it falls a little bit if we get word that Debo is active. I am sort of, like I said, I'm approaching this 49ers game as if whether Debo is active or not, he's going to have a reduced volume. And so I'm factoring that into my logic here. But I think the fact that he's active is going to force some people to adjust their thinking on these lines, and which might drive the number down here a little bit to 77 or 75 or something. So wait to bet this prop, but regardless of what happens with Debo, I'm on the over here, and we're sort of following the similar train of thought with McCaffrey that we talked about, but with just going in reverse. Like we talked about with McCaffrey, Lions are a single high coverage team, and teams like to play single high coverage at elevated rates against the 49ers. So we're expecting a very high rate of single high coverage. So we got to look at what do the 49ers do? Well, against single high coverage, it's much greater odds. You've got a one-on-one matchup out there somewhere. And when it's Aiyuk, when they think they've got that one-on-one matchup out there, so if someone's on an island against him, that's like an automatic check in their offense. They're going to go to him and they're going to attack downfield, which is why I'm on the yardage prop in particular, because we have the potential to have a 40-yard play or something like that out of him, which allows us to hit the over on a receiving yards prop when, maybe surprisingly he only gets 3 catches or something like that. So that's why I'm leaning towards the receiving yards, but the same logic applies if you wanted to bet the receptions as well. I think that's justified. So based on the fact that we think Debo is not going to play or limited, we know we're seeing single high coverage. We look at Ayuk's target share on the season. It's 25% against single high, 19% against two high. So already a pretty big difference there overall. But with Debo is not on the field, he sees a 22% target share against two high, basically the same as that 19%, but 37% against single high. He gets a huge jump because Debo actually does see a decent, although he's not regularly used downfield, they will sometimes, if they can get a one-on-one matchup, use him to stretch the field. So you take that out of the equation, and Aiyuk is getting all of those opportunities now. So this one is pretty straightforward to me. It's a great matchup regardless because of the fact that we're seeing a lot of single high coverage in this game. And if Debo is out of the game, it almost becomes too easy. I love the prop in that case. Think you're muted, Todd.
He is my favorite. It wouldn't be an episode with you guys if I didn't do that once. So I think Aiyuk's my favorite play in the slate. The Lions have been very susceptible. If you go 100% Aiyuk and you go 30% McCaffrey, 100% Purdy, I think you have leveraged the field pretty effectively while taking advantage of maybe 90% Aiyuk. And so I really, that's very tempting to me because McCaffrey, there will be plenty of people who have that threesome, but not to that level, I don't think.
I should also mention too, I forgot to mention this, but we had basically this exact same conversation last week about Mike Evans and how the Buccaneers were going to attack that defense, and look what happened there.
Yeah. Yep. And I ended up around 45% Mike Evans, which is not bad. Actually, I was closer to 50. But again, he was my favorite play on the slate. A couple years ago, especially on a short slate, I would have been 80 or 90%. And it's like my crack. I just have been, since I started using the optimizer, it's, and you got to get over that fear of missing out, that FOMO. It's brutal. All right. So, and it's really bad when you get it right and you still lose money because you just pissed it all away.
Yeah.
All right. So you do have another prop for us, and it is the former best wide receiver in football, who is a shell of his former self, who everyone was talking about as the hot guy because they saved him for the playoffs last week. And then he ran less routes than he had all year. But you have him as a prop over on Odell Beckham. I am fascinated because I know you've got good reasoning.
Yeah, Odell Beckham over on his receiving yards, which is available at just 20.5. And the performance last week is obviously a factor here because it keeps that line really low, which is great for us. As I mentioned earlier, the Chiefs are likely to lean on cover one at a really high rate in this game, despite the fact that they're usually a too high cover team. They want to adjust. I mentioned how we saw them at a 39% rate of cover one against Justin Fields, obviously the most similar quarterback they've played in terms of overall skill set to Lamar Jackson. So we've got good reason to think we're going to see a lot of cover one in this game, which was a factor in our Lamar Jackson prop. In this case, when they're in cover one, Odell Beckham has seen a consistent boost in his usage all year. He's actually their second most targeted receiver. And, it makes sense, sort of like the Brandon Aiyuk conversation that we just had. He's the type of receiver that, even at this stage of his career, he's a good option in one-on-one situations. And they try to take advantage of that. If they think it's a one-on-one matchup for Odell, they're going to take some shots deep. He sees a 17% target share against cover one, and 35% of those targets are 20 or more yards downfield. Because of that, his yards per reception against cover one, 24.4 yards. So we're going to see cover one at a higher rate in this game, probably about a third of the time, roughly, maybe even a little bit higher than that. That means probably multiple opportunities for Odell Beckham to get down the field, multiple targets down the field. He's just got to catch one, and we hit the over on his total receiving yards prop. Now, obviously, you could use the exact same logic and bet the over on his longest reception. That's completely justified. If you're choosing between the two, I prefer the longest, the overall receiving yards, because that line is so low. Like I said, 20.5 yards. You could easily do that in one catch, but you also leave yourself open to the possibility that he has 3 catches for 25 yards. He's had stat lines like that this season as well. So even though that's not what we're expecting the game to play out as, it's on the table at least. And so you give yourself another way to win the prop by playing the receiving yards rather than just playing that longest reception. Although playing both, totally justified.